behind the desk, and then we'll go through our format. I'll introduce you to your moderator. Your moderator is Cynthia Wolkin, Congressional Committeeman, woman. Of it. Sorry, of the Missoula Central Committee, and and the timekeeper is Emily Brock, the vice chair, gender-neutral term of the County Central Committee. So thank you very much. First candidate is Dennis McDonald. Hello, Dennis. Okay. And we have Melinda Gopher and Tyler Gernant. And Tyler Gernant. So if you want to come up and just take a seat, the format has 4 parts. We're going to have an opening statements that are limited to 5 minutes. The time will be kept up here. 30 seconds means green, and red means stop. And you in the audience are integral to our timekeeping because you will see the signals as well. And then after each candidate has a chance to introduce themselves, we'll have mock legislative speeches on the table out in the hall. You found sort of a mock piece of legislation, and each candidate will pretend that you are their colleagues in the House of Representatives, and the MCAT is C-SPAN, and they're persuading us of their position on a piece of legislation. We will then take questions from the audience, and those can be submitted on index cards, and we have some pens, so we'll send those around, and then we'll ask those. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the questions and the opportunity to weigh in with a rebuttal to as many as 3 of another candidate's questions. So please direct your questions at one candidate and one candidate only, and then we'll have some closing speeches at the end. And we're shooting for a 75-minute duration.
Jason, can you tell them that Caroline will walk around and collect
Yeah, Caroline Temple and I will walk around and collect those, and be sure to stick around for our 50-50 drawing. You can get a ticket if you haven't already. So thank you very much. Cynthia?
Thank you. And please buy 50-50 tickets, because I think I'm the only one who has, and I'd like to win more money than just what I put in. So, and when you write questions, just keep in mind, obviously, these candidates are candidates for federal office, so maybe try to stick to issues on the federal scale.
You have to say who the questions are.
And again, please say who the questions are directed to. So for the introduction, we have, first we have Tyler, and then Melinda, and then Dennis. So go ahead.
Does that work? Okay. Sorry. Well, first of all, I want to thank the Missoula County Democrats for hosting this forum and for the chance to speak with all of you. Because this campaign really is extremely important, because it represents truly the first time in a long time, really, I think, that we've had to finally and fully reject the divisive politics that are plaguing Washington right now. And we've got some real serious issues to tackle. I think we all understand that. And it's really hard for us to tackle these problems and find solutions when we have this constant partisan bickering that's going on right now. And so I think, I don't want to say this is going to be easy. It's not. But the truth is, I wouldn't be running if I thought this would be easy. If this were 2000 and we were creating jobs, growing the economy, we had a massive budget surplus, I wouldn't feel the need to run for this seat. The truth is, I'm running because I've seen too many of my friends lose their jobs in the last year and a half and have to leave Montana just to find work. I'm running because we need to balance our checkbook to ensure that the programs that we hold dear, programs like Social Security and Medicare, are around for the next generation. Because if we don't balance our checkbook, we won't be able to implement the kinds of change that this country needs. But most importantly, I'm running because we need to restore responsibility back to Washington. And by that, I don't mean the kind of responsibility that they're peddling right now. I don't mean finding a scapegoat. I mean taking hold of our problems and finding a solution. And it's that kind of responsibility that was born into me through 4 generations of Montanans. I had a great-grandfather who homesteaded up on the High Line in the very far northeast corner of the state. And from there, my family really fanned out across the state. I had a grandpa who worked at the smelter in Anaconda. My other grandpa was a truck driver in Great Falls. And then I was born right here in Missoula to a dad who was a high school math teacher and football coach over at Hellgate, and a mom who worked at what was then the Apple Tree restaurant, and many of you will now know as Finnegan's. But it was through my parents' loving support that I was able to graduate from Law School and become a successful small business attorney. I helped facilitate the building of low-income housing tax credit projects. I also helped found the Rural Advocacy League, which is a nonprofit group dedicated to empowering rural communities. We also founded the Missoula Greenhorns, a young business professionals networking group dedicated to ensuring that young business professionals had access to the established business community and could help grow their careers. But it's that kind of responsibility that I was talking about, that inherited sense of responsibility that Dennis Rehberg has really never understood. He's never gotten it. You know, when he took office in 2001, we had over a $100 billion budget surplus. We haven't balanced the budget one time since then. We now have a national debt approaching $12 trillion, and when you take into account the unfunded obligations of Social Security and Medicare, that national debt approaches $56 trillion, which means that in order for us to pay that off, every American man, woman, and child would owe $175,000. We need to find a way to change the incentive, change the system in Washington from one that encourages spending to one that encourages savings. And the best way for us to do that here in Montana, the best way in general, is to create jobs and grow the economy. Because if the 90s taught us anything, it's that when people are working, they contribute to the economy and everyone benefits, including the government. And the best way for us here in Montana is to position ourselves on the forefront of the new energy industry. And by that I mean the industry based on clean, renewable, and sustainable sources of energy. We have to be willing to invest in the infrastructure, both the physical and educational infrastructure, to position ourselves for the future economy of Montana. But the truth is, if we want that kind of change, we have to change who we send to Washington. You know, when Dennis Rehberg took office back in 2001, since that time, he's managed to enact exactly 3 bills, 3 whole bills that he sponsored. And all 3 of those bills were to name federal buildings, which, when you think about it, means that we pay this guy $170,000 a year. And in return, what we get for it is that he will name 1 federal building for us for every 3 years that he's in office, not even a full term. But you don't even have to take my word for it, because you can just ask his chief of staff. They did that in the last election. They asked him what Rehberg's greatest legislative accomplishments had been in his, by this point, 8 years in office. And he listed off a resolution congratulating Carroll College on a football championship, and I think my favorite one of all, a resolution wishing the city of Billings a happy birthday, which actually died in committee. So I want to thank you and look forward to answering your questions, maybe some issues a little more in depth.
Thank you, Mr. Gernant. And next we have Ms. Gopher.
Hello. Thank you, Jason. Thank you for the Missoula Democrats for inviting me to participate in this forum. I have a long history working the grassroots movement here in Montana, whether it was with the environmental issues and also civil rights issues. I see in the past I have a father who had kind of an upbringing. You know, I was raised by an activist, and so you can imagine how colorful my upbringing was. And to make it even more colorful, I grew up on Hill 57, outside of Great Falls there. So I have a very good understanding that there are many of you here tonight. You're hurting. You're hurting because of the neglect that you are experiencing by our elected leaders. And I'm not just going to point the finger at just Republicans. Let's be honest. And let's look at the truth of it, is that we need to hold some of our elected officials in the Democratic Party accountable as well. We kind of need to steer them back on track. And I am a writer, and I've been doing that. And my goal here is to shake up the status quo. I have no ambitions of being a politician. I am a housewife, I am a student, I'm the wife of a veteran, and my family has struggled, and we're struggling right along with you. I'm struggling to get an education. I am the most improbable candidate running. I don't expect to win. It would be great if I did, and I will fight to win. But I understand, a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go out to the labor rally downtown and walk the picket line with many of the workers of the Smurfit Stone plant. And that was very eye-opening for me. I felt their pain. I felt their sense of uncertainty. And what really touched me was that many of these people were older people that should be thinking about their golden years, a safe and secure retirement, fighting for jobs, fighting for their future still. That affected me. I didn't quit thinking about that for days. So I would like to focus my energy on that very issue of jobs. Whether we're the greeter at Walmart, which is the only way I can afford to feed my family, you know, is what about those folks there that should be enjoying a secure retirement, but they're working, some of them stand there 8 hours a day? We need answers, and we need people to fight for the average man and woman, the youth in this community. It is heartbreaking to see some of the situations low-income youth are experiencing in this community. So there are a good many of them that are homeless, and they're trying to go to school, and their parents have no housing. So we need to look at the everyday person and the everyday pain. And let's forget about entitlement politics here, because that is not going to secure your future. I grew up in a 2-room house on Hill 57. I know pain. I know misery. I know suffering. And our houses were built out of scraps. So we all know the wind in Great Falls on the other side there that would come right through the walls during the winter. We had a little wood stove that would keep our little shanties warm. And that's how I grew up. I understand the heartache and the pain of federal neglect. I understand how Washington has neglected the average American, and I hope that I can make that difference for you. Thank you.
And now, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you very much, Melinda. That was wonderful. Thank you for having me here. It's a great opportunity. As you know, I want to take a moment and tell you a little bit about who I am. I live in Melville, and if there's anyone here that doesn't know where Melville's at, there'll be a test at the end of the evening. I ranched there with my wife Sharon of 33 years and our 4 children. Our oldest daughter, who's a graduate of MSU, is home at the ranch after spending some time in the business world chasing her dream, breaking and riding cutting horses. Next down is Courtney. She's completing her PhD in June at the University of Colorado at Boulder. Talked to her this morning. She's entering the job world. She's applying for jobs around the country and finding it very difficult. I told her, of course, she was always welcome to come back to the ranch and put her doctorate to work cleaning stalls. She failed to see the humor in that, but we would love to have her home. Next in line is Casey. Casey struggled in school, but I made a deal with him that if he got his degree, he could come home and take over management of the ranch, and he's doing that. And our baby is a senior at Montana State and an engineering student. I share that with you because one of the reasons I've undertaken this race is to make sure that our young people across Montana have some of the same opportunities that Sharon and I had. And I'm concerned about it. I too, Melinda, was here at Smurfit Stone several weeks ago. I was there the last day, the changing of the last shift. I too talked to those folks leaving, some of those folks that had been working there for 25 years. We lost 600 jobs. 417 of them were good union jobs. It doesn't stop there. Today here in the Garden City, you have 28 businesses that have closed over the last year. You have 13 commercial office spaces that's either being sold or in foreclosure. Macy's just closed with another 60 jobs. There's nothing unusual about that. You go down the Bitterroot, you see business after business closing. I was in Lewistown last week. A year ago, they had 2 grocery stores. Today, they have 1. Last year, they had 2 auto dealers. Today, they have none. And it goes on and on. Farmers and ranchers. I've been to all 56 counties across Montana over the last few months, and I've never seen the angst in people's eyes that I see today. Real concern about whether or not they're going to be able to keep their ranches, their farms, their lifestyle, the culture that they've come to love. So I have some ideas of what we need to do to turn this economic downturn around. Number 1, we need a new congressman, a congressman who will make better decisions for Montana, someone who understands what it's like to struggle. Melinda, I struggled too. I came from a family that twice failed in the agriculture business, family that at times struggled to put food on the table. It was a good experience, not a bad experience, but I learned something from those days. I learned how to work hard, I learned how to persevere, and I learned how to listen. And I think those are 3 reasons why I need to be your next congressman. In addition, to turn this economy around, we need a fundamental change in our philosophical, economic basis for running the country. Trickle-down economics, supply-side economics is in fact voodoo economics. We need to get back to what we all know, and that is if you invest in the ordinary person, you'll enjoy an extraordinary return. That's how we worked our way out of the Great Depression. You know, just one example here in Montana. In the 1930s, someone had the vision to dam the mighty Missouri. And we had 10,000 people working hard. I guess my time's up, so I better stop. But again, we need to get back to investing in normal people, and that's the answer to our economic downturn. Thank you.
Thank you for those introductions. And next, each candidate has been given a specific issue and asked to give a 3-minute speech as if they were speaking on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives in support of the issue. I guess first we're going to go with Mr. Gernant, and your issue is fair taxation. Your website says that the current tax system places the burden of taxation on people who work while giving moneyed interests a free pass. Under the tax cuts passed in 2001, the 55% tax rate with a $1 million exemption on estates declined from 45% in 2009. In 2010, the estate tax was phased out entirely for 1 year, but the tax cuts will expire completely in 2011, returning the rate to what it was before the 2001 tax cuts, unless legislation passes to change this. Your hypothetical is that there is a bill on the floor of the House to make the estate tax permanent at 45%, with a $3.5 million exemption indexed to inflation. Please take a stance on this, and you have 3 minutes for your speech.
Madam Speaker, distinguished House colleagues. I believe the legislation before us regarding the estate tax represents a compromise in the best sense of that word. We really have two very strong competing issues at play here. We have really two very strong values trying to find a middle ground. On one side, we have the basic societal sense of compassion, that when a family represents or when a family goes through a loss and the family is in the grieving process, we don't want Uncle Sam walking into their house, into their living room, and saying, looking around and saying, you know, you got some pretty nice stuff here. I want my cut of it, though. We want family heirlooms and family mementos to be able to be passed from one generation to the next without being taxed, every little bit of it. Now, over time, that exemption has grown and grown and grown to the point where we now exempt things like small family farms, small family businesses, and even childhood homes being passed from one generation to the next. Essentially, we're saying with this value that we value your family's heritage, and we want you to be able to pass that family heritage on to the next generation without worrying that Uncle Sam will take a part of that. On the other hand, though, we have a basic principle of fairness in taxation. And this basic principle of fairness in taxation, well, quite frankly, the exemption for the estate tax is a slap in the face to that basic principle. Because we've got two groups of people. You've got one group of people who works hard for their money. They go to work every day trying to support their family, and as a result, through their labor, they earn money that the government taxes. On the other hand, you've got a group of people who right now, without having any estate tax whatsoever, which is where we're at this year, those people can essentially sit on their duff, not doing anything. And because of their birth, because of what family they were born into, they're able to basically not pay taxes on vast sums of money, well beyond the $3.5 million exemption that we're talking about here today. So essentially, you've got one group of people who are being taxed for their labor, and another group of people who are getting a free pass as a result of their mother going through labor. And there's a problem with that. There's something fundamentally wrong with the idea that someone can basically sit by a pool sipping Mai Tais and martinis, not doing anything, and manage to avoid taxation while someone who works hard for their money is being taxed at a much higher rate because they're actually being taxed. This legislation, I believe, represents that compromise. It represents finding the middle ground between those two competing values. And I think that we need to take this step and pass this legislation so that, quite frankly, we don't have to continually address this problem in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could just encourage and remind people to fill out any questions they might have, and Jason will come around if you raise your hand and snag those from you. Moving on to Mr. McDonald. Your website describes energy independence as a matter of national security. In your hypothetical, as part of energy reform, the bill on the House floor proposes to impose severance taxes on domestic coal, oil, and natural gas extraction, and excise taxes on imported coal, oil, and natural gas to fund a national energy trust to finance conservation measures and renewable energy development. The bill will raise the cost of coal and oil mining in Montana, but fund jobs, making existing buildings more energy efficient, and domestic development of wind power. So please take a position, and you'll have 3 minutes to advocate for it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Madam Clerk, members of this distinguished House. It's an honor to address you with regard to this bill. I wholeheartedly agree with the concept of taxing imported oil, coal, and natural gas. We import, as a matter of fact, very little coal and almost no natural gas. On the other hand, we import, as we all know, 60% of our crude oil that we utilize here on an annual basis. That has resulted in $800 million being outsourced from this country to dictators in the Middle East. We can no longer afford to continue that policy. It's not sustainable. It results in the greatest exportation of wealth in the history of mankind. Secondly, the notion of taking the proceeds from those revenues generated by this tax and in reinvesting those monies in renewable energy sources, putting people to work, creating new opportunities in the field of renewable energy is exactly the program we need to adopt. On the other hand, I don't quite buy the total package that's been presented here with regard to severance taxes, and I'll be offering a friendly amendment. I certainly agree that the severance tax on both oil and coal needs to be imposed. Coal certainly, until we learn to burn that source in a clean manner. And to my knowledge, that technology has not been proven to date. I'm mindful that we have an experimental generation plant planned in Illinois and one under construction as I speak in Red Deer. But I'm not convinced as I stand here that clean coal is not an oxymoron. The friendly amendment I'm going to offer makes natural gas not subject to this severance tax because natural gas is abundant, it's cheap, and we can burn it relatively clean. It's not the ultimate answer, but it's an interim answer. I am the first congressman to adopt the Pickens plan. We can immediately convert our 18-wheeler fleet to natural gas. We can do likewise with our heavy equipment, and we can reduce our dependence on foreign oil by a third in doing so, and we have the technology to do that. We can do it immediately, so I'll be offering that friendly amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Gopher, your campaign website asked for Montana state residents to help me kill, we'll quote, Montana state residents to help me kill the disastrous Baucus healthcare bill because, quote, the bill is a testament of the appeasement of the insurance industry, end quote. In your hypothetical, a conference report resembling the Senate healthcare bill offering subsidies to individuals to buy private health insurance and raising the maximum income eligibility requirement for Medicaid, but modified to earn Olympia Snow's votes, gets cloture in the U.S. Senate and is pending in the House. It requires a simple majority to pass the House and will then be ready for the president's signature. Please advocate for your position.
Madam Speaker and distinguished members of the House, I am offering my proposal here to send this too critically and vitally important piece of legislation back to the drawing board. Let's start over. And the reason for this is the average person cannot afford this bill as it's written. It does not provide for a single-payer coverage. More importantly, this bill does not provide a path to economic recovery. As we all know, health costs are sinking businesses every day. Health costs are preventing businessmen and women across this land from hiring people, from creating jobs, and it's strangling the life out of our economy. There is only one true path to economic recovery for this great nation, and that is single-payer health care. There is no way in this day and age, in the economic realities that we experience as average citizens, that we can afford health care as it is without reform of our hospitals and clinics and without reform of the health industry. This bill does not do that. Whether we risk losing the momentum now, it's better to get it done right for the average person. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to be moving on to the question and answer session. We've set aside 40 minutes total, and just to remind the candidates again, we're giving 2 minutes for each question and 3 1-minute rebuttals. So the first question is for Mr. McDonald. For the first time since the 1990s, teen pregnancy has risen. 1 in 4 sexually active teens contract an STD every year. Do you believe the federal government should continue supporting abstinence-only until marriage programs?
Thank you for the question. Is this on? Can you hear me? Thank you for the question. My personal view is that obviously we need to continue to invest in educational programs. That's, of course, an obligation, it seems to me, of our government. But I'm always, when I hear notions such as this, I always wonder if it's a guise to talk about a woman's right to choose. And I have a very conservative notion about that. I fundamentally and strongly believe that the federal government should not be involved in the health care decisions of our citizens. And as a congressman, I would fight every day to make sure that that continues to be the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this question is for Ms. Gopher. Congress has failed to act on the important issue of comprehensive immigration reform for well over a decade. If you are elected to the U.S. House, would you support a measure to prioritize family unification and comprehensive immigration reform?
Thank you for asking that question. Back last September, I went to a rally of activists from throughout the United States, and one of the key issues was immigration reform. It was very eye-opening for me to be able to see immigration issues as they affect the individual. I spent a lot of time with Hispanic, Asian Americans, people from all walks of life, and to see the pain of failure of our policies to address their reality. And I think a good part of our discussion during that weekend was how the health bill is really being doctored up to deny their ability to thrive here in this country. There are many people who have legally immigrated to this country who will be denied access even to health insurance plans under this bill. This has not been fixed. As a congresswoman, I would ensure that immigration reform is addressed in a way that is fair and balanced to all sectors of this society, and that we enact humane policies and we respect the sanctity of the human family. Thank you.
Thank you. And now for Mr. Gernant. Do you see your age and lack of political experience as a setback for you at this point in the race?
Actually, no. To be honest with you, I view that as a tremendous asset right now. Quite frankly, I'm sure all of you feel probably the same way. Talking to a lot of people in Montana, there's a sickness in Washington right now. And I, quite frankly, represent everything that is not Washington. We have a system that is fundamentally broken. And quite frankly, until we fix that system, we're going to continue having these problems. I don't have a lifetime of political favors to pay back. My only favors, if I get elected, will be to the people of Montana, the people who elected me. And that's who I'm fighting to work for. That's who I will work for. So no, I think, quite frankly, I've got enough life experience to make up more than plenty for political experience.
Okay. And if anybody wants to jump in, please let me know so I don't keep talking. So, Mr. McDonald, the first question probably won't take too long, so I'm going to give you two. The first question is, what book are you reading right now or have you read lately? And the second question is, how do we get a country like China to compete fairly with the United States? If they do not, do we go it alone, or are you okay with the higher prices that would result?
With regard to the first question, I just finished reading Sorkin's book on Too Big to Fail. Before that, over the holidays, I read Mike Mansfield's biography and Teddy Kennedy's memoirs. Just prior to that, I had read Tom Friedman's book, Hot, Flat, and Crowded. And prior to that, Paul Krugman's book on Depression-era economics, Kevin Phillips' book on bad money, and so on. I usually have 2 or 3 books going at any point in time. With regard to the second question, which was, refresh my memory again?
China.
China. I should share with you that after law school, I did an internship at the Academy of International Law, and thereafter clerked on the World Court. It was during the Cod Wars. More recently, I served in both the Clinton and Bush administration on the International Trade Advisory Committee. I got fired from that job right after I was elected chair of the Montana State Democratic Party. I got a letter from the Bush administration saying I was fired. How would I deal with China? First, we have to reevaluate and adjust their currency. Their currency's too cheap in the global marketplace, and we need some fundamental changes in our trade agreements so that it levels the playing field. We need particular language addressing labor standards, environmental standards, and that would go a long ways towards balancing that trade imbalance.
Go ahead.
I'd just like to say, too, adding to that, I think we do need to fundamentally change the trade structure with China, but we also need to take a look at China is the biggest culprit, really, for corporate espionage. We send products over there to be manufactured, and as a result, they steal the technology and end up using it for themselves, and there's virtually no repercussions for them right now. Until we fundamentally address that problem, we're going to continue having the problems that we have. In addition to that, I do think that we need to look at fair trade with China to ensure that we're actually getting the kinds of fair trade that we bargained for initially.
Okay. This question is directed at Ms. Gopher, and then the other 2 candidates will have just a minute to respond, and it won't count against your other minutes. Could a reasonable accommodation be fashioned between gun owners and people who are concerned about gun violence, and how would you go about achieving this?
I think if you've been reading the papers recently, you can see where they're allowing there's proposals out there to allow guns into our national parks. I think that there may be a balance, but I'm leery of expanding gun rights in one sector of the population and taking it away from another. And I believe in the Second Amendment. I think out here in Montana, we all share a strong hunting tradition. I know in my family, that means a lot to us. But in terms of violence, it is a very fine line. And I think how I would respond to it is that we have to look at the end of the day whether or not we're going to preserve a constitutional right, that we are as fair and balanced in that approach as we can be. And it is a very difficult issue that I personally feel when it comes to gun rights. I know that they're near and dear to everybody's heart here in Montana, but we are a a fairly sparsely populated state. We don't encounter the same sorts of violence in the larger metropolitan areas of the country, and it is a tough balance. That is a tough question. And here in Montana, it is very hard for us to be able to give up a right that we have always held, and in order to make society safer. So that is, that is very much a work in progress for me as far as forming my views on that. Thank you.
If I may. Thanks, Melinda. Thank you. In my house in Melville, gun control has to do with Sharon screaming at the kids and myself to put our guns away when we come in. But I have to tell you, in all seriousness, this last legislation, in these critical times when we're facing so many real issues, to pass a law guaranteeing your right to carry a gun through the national parks is, I'm wondering where the priorities are, and concerned that the NRA and the gun lobby has a disproportionate influence on our legislative agenda.
Thank you. Tyler?
I would just say that I think fundamentally there's a difference between the rural communities, rural states like Montana, and more urban areas like Chicago and DC. From my perspective, I think there are many places in Montana where you're more than 50 miles away from the nearest police officer. And to that extent, I think we need to protect the rights of Montanans to own guns for not just protection, but for hunting and things like that. I think Chicago and DC ought to have the ability to do what they want, what they feel they need for their protection, and I think we ought to uphold those laws.
Okay. Thank you. The next question is for Mr. Gernant, and this question was crafted by Brenda Desmond. She works in the mental health court here in Missoula. And the question is, what is your view of the bill pending before the House that intends to reduce criminal recidivism by persons with serious mental illness by allowing them to receive Medicaid upon release from jail or prison so they have access to the treatment and services essential to their mental health, which will increase the likelihood that they will not commit criminal offenses again?
I guess the simple answer is I support it. I think that it's imperative that we provide those with mental illnesses access to the care that they need, so that we're ensuring they aren't a problem to society in the future. I think there's a lot of things that have happened here in Montana that are really models for that. There's mental health courts that are being put in place that I think are really a model for what we could be doing to ensure that in the future we take care of those problems before they become really serious problems. But again, I guess the short answer is, yeah, I support it.
As a follow-up, would you support federal funding to help states kind of enact model courts based on DUI courts, mental health courts, other alternative court systems?
Obviously, as I said in my opening statement, I think the deficit is a large concern of mine. That is something that I view as a priority, in my opinion. But as a broader sense of reducing the deficit, I don't think we can take that off the table, and we have to be sure that that falls within the broader budget. But as a standalone, yes, I would support that increase in funding.
Okay, well, that will segue nicely into the next question for you.
Oh.
What steps would you take to reduce the deficit?
I like that question. There's a lot of things that I think we could be doing. First and foremost, I'm extremely glad to see that the PAYGO system was finally reinstituted. That was a system that said that we have to find ways to pay for every item of new spending that we implement. President Obama just signed that a couple of weeks ago, and it's the first time we've had it since the 90s. We had that throughout the 90s, and magically we managed to get rid of the budget deficit. That expired in 2002, and our budget deficits immediately returned. Beyond that, I think we also need to look at setting aside the Social Security Trust Fund, and despite the negative implications of Al Gore, I think the lockbox actually was a good idea. We really shouldn't be taking and constantly writing IOUs to ourselves for the Social Security Trust Fund, the Medicare Trust Fund, and those are, quite frankly, the government doesn't allow you to raid your retirement account. Why do we let the government raid ours? And finally, I guess I would say that I think we need to reform the use it or lose it system that really pervades our federal budgeting process. Right now we have a system that tells federal agencies, government bureaucrats, that if you don't spend every dollar, every penny of the money that you're given, well then the next year you're not going to be given as much money. The obvious result of that is that we create this perverse incentive to spend money. We need to change that around so that we're creating a system that encourages savings. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. One of them is, I think, having a floating budgetary year so that agencies don't necessarily know when their budgetary period is being analyzed, but at the same time, they have to spend money when they need it. It's something that relates back personally for me when my mom was a federal employee. And I can recall many times as a child her having to go to D.C. at the end of September because that was the end of their budgetary period. And they had a lot of money left over in their travel account. She didn't have any need to go to D.C., but her boss told her she had to because they had to get rid of that money before their budgetary period was over. So,
Sure.
I'd also like to add, too, that we spend $450 million a day on the wars, so we need to end the wars. And we need to put that money back into building our economy.
Thank you. Go ahead.
These are all good points. I wanted to point out our present congressman voted against the re-implementation of the PAYGO legislation. I'm sure most of you knew that. But the key, as I said in my opening remarks, to getting us out of this economic downturn and balancing this budget is empowering people to give them opportunities, give them jobs, and we can grow the pie. And that is really, in the final analysis, the only way that we'll work our way out of this economic downturn. Thank you.
And Mr. McDonald, the question is back to you. Smurfit Stone just closed while our forest floors are covered in biomass and our trees are dying from beetle kill. What will you do to reopen the plant and find use for our biomass?
I had a conversation here in Missoula just this afternoon with an engineer that's working on this very issue. He tells me that he's done the analysis and that we can make use of the Smurfit Stone plant as a biomass generating facility. The question raises once again another issue for me, though. At the very time when this plant is closing and we're losing the jobs that I indicated earlier, Mr. Smurfit last week took possession of his new yacht at a cost of $68.5 million. That's what I pointed out earlier. Trickle-down economics is broken, and this shouldn't be occurring in our economy. Now, lastly, I would point out I'm always a bit skeptical, and I want to see it work, but I'm skeptical about whether chipping logs and using this facility as a biomass plant will be economically viable. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And there's one last element to that, and that is we need to monitor closely, should we go ahead with that project, to determine the amount of carbon we are again putting into the atmosphere. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I would also just state that I think right now we have a federal energy policy that is fundamentally broken. It's a policy that encourages these massive plants, massive power producers, even massive wind farms, and doesn't provide for local and distributive power. Until we address that fundamental problem with the federal energy policy, we're going to continue having these problems, getting new biomass facilities, getting all kinds of biofuels, even small wind turbines, solar. Those things are going to have a hard time getting past the day of light. We also have to look, though, I think, at creating energy banks, banks that will provide the funding necessary to provide the startup for these kinds of projects. For something like Smurfit Stone that's having problems finding investors, we have to be able to provide them with the funding necessary to get started and actually build those plants up to where they can be profitable on their own. So I think that's where we fundamentally have to go to start with.
Thank you. Ms. Gopher?
I'd just like to offer a comment here that 70% of a lot of this nation's energy potential lies in tribal lands in one way, shape, or form. I think that the crisis we're in now and the high gas prices we saw a couple summers ago really tells us that we have to form these partnerships like never before. We have to look at outside the box. We have to look at this issue in new ways. And we need to really be on the cutting edge of innovation if we're going to not only solve our energy problems and create jobs. What I'd like to see is that happen. And the other issue that concerns me is all the tar sand going north of the border going on. That is an imaginary line, so what happens up there does impact our environment. So we need some strong coordination with the Canadian government to ensure that that development is you know, right now it looks out of control. It's a disaster up there. So, you know, that affects us down here.
Okay, and thank you. And this question is for you again, Ms. Gopher. Scott Roeder was convicted of first-degree murder for the cold-blooded killing of Dr. George Tiller in Kansas. Dr. Tiller was a provider of women's health services, including abortion. Many believe Mr. Roeder and groups like Operation Rescue that actually incite violence to accomplish their anti-choice message are terrorists. Would you support the Department of Justice's classification of Roeder and groups like him, like his, as domestic terrorists?
Yes, yes, I would. I was just, you know, doing some of my own readings on this issue, and it alarms me that not only is this becoming a more entrenched form of crime against women and our reproductive choices, but it is also entrenched in our policy making. And one of the things that this is why we need more women in Congress. We need women to protect our rights in Congress. We need women to protect our bodies and our choices in Congress. We don't have that right now. We have folks like Bart Stupak that are supposed to be on our side, derailing our rights to, you know, to have fundamental health care that is constitutionally protected, and it's protected by the Supreme Court. So I am very concerned about a woman's right to choose, and I think that the only way to solve our dilemmas there is to elect more women. And I think Senator Boxer stated it best a while back, and she said, "This always happens to us. You know, we become the scapegoat of any kind of progress, and it's always the abortion issue that comes to a you know." Things come to a screeching halt. And so she was very frustrated. And I share that frustration with her. Thank you.
Thanks. And this is a follow-up question. Ms. Gopher, why have you not filed yet?
I'm waiting for, I'm building intrigue. I'm building intrigue, and I'm trying to build the interest in it because I am a Native American woman, and there has never been a Native American woman, to my knowledge, that has served in the U.S. Congress, and every other barrier has been broken, and that one is not. I would like to see the people of Montana come out and really make sure that this happens. I think that we need a lot of diverse views and a lot of diverse experiences to that great institution. And what I wanted to do was to try to ensure that I think this can happen. I think this is the time. And you know, my father worked to get the cultural integrity clause in the state constitution. I was 7 years old, and that was kind of my introduction into politics. I accompanied him in my little buckskin dress and my dance regalia, and provision has withstood the test of time. But my father was smart in the way that, one of the great tradition bearers of the Democratic Party here in the state was Leo Graybill, who was the president of the convention. And he knew, my dad had this incredible sense of timing, that you cannot advance these great social agendas. You got to strike when the iron is hot, and so that's what I'm doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I add?
Sure.
Melinda, you're. I think I do think you have a great opportunity here. Just last cycle, we elected the first Native American woman in the history of the state to win a statewide election, and Denise Juneau is doing just a wonderful job. So I think you bring something special to this campaign. I must say one thing, however, when you indicated that this seat has never been held by a woman, Jeanette Rankin rolled over in her grave.
Okay. This question is directed to Mr. McDonald. If you could offer one change to the logging and motorized recreation bill introduced by Senator Tester, what would it be, or do you support the bill as written?
This is a tough one. I've been ducking this issue for a while. Looks like I'm trapped here in Missoula. I love John Tester. I worked as hard as anyone to get him elected. I'll stand behind him on just about anything that he undertakes. I don't particularly like this bill for a couple of reasons. One, the process. And I've shared this with John, so I'm not saying something here I haven't shared with John. A lot of Montanans were left out of the process early on. Now, to his credit, I think he's listening to folks across the state today. I just wish ag, some of the conservation groups that didn't participate initially, and organized labor, by the way, was left entirely out of the process. With regard to the language in the bill, no one wants to see our wilderness areas enlarged any more than I do. I'm not sure, but I may be the only person that's actually rode the trail on both sides of the Chinese Wall and has been through Hell Roaring and Swamp Creek and down the ridge of the Bitterroot Wilderness. But I also, I must say, have a concern with this bill about the sustainability of cutting 10,000 acres of lumber annually. First of all, there's no market for it. So if I was in the House today, would offer some friendly amendments to this effort.
Thank you. Thank you. This question, maybe we can just go quickly down and just maybe the candidates can state whether they support or oppose this. The Hyde Amendment bars the use of federal funds for abortion. It is enacted every year via an appropriations bill. Would you actively work to eliminate this rider? Mr. Gernant, you want to start?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't need the microphone. Yes.
Okay, that was quick. Okay, this one is addressed to all candidates, so we'll give you 3 minutes each to answer this. It's sort of a big one. So why will you be the candidate that finally defeats Dennis Rehberg, unlike so many that have failed before you? You want to start, Mr. Gernant?
Absolutely. I think, as I stated before, this year represents a real sea change in the atmosphere, not just in the United States, but in Montana. There is a very strong anti-incumbent sentiment that is pervading not just the country, but Montana. And it shows when you look at Denny Rehberg's polling. Last August, they took a poll that showed only 39% of Montanans would vote to reelect him. And from my take of that, it's because he represents all the problems that Washington represents to us right now. This constant partisan bickering, not getting anything done. For me, as I stated earlier, I think my youth is an asset in that. I don't have the lifetime of political favors to pay back. I'm someone who can bring a fresh face and new ideas to a process that has grown quite stale. We have one of the oldest Congresses in history right now, and it shows. I think that by working hard, building up grassroots, the same way that President Obama was able to in Montana, but getting those people engaged, getting folks like you engaged from the ground roots up, that's where we're going to find success in this election. It's what we haven't done in the past, and it's what we need to do in the future if we're going to be successful. So that's why I feel like we can do this, because I think I bring the energy and the enthusiasm that it takes to really to hammer home on this.
Ms. Gopher?
Well, as soon as I dispatch these two fellows on each side of me, I'll get busy dealing with Denny there. Look, he's an embarrassment to our state, and I have to say, I meant that in a lighthearted way. I just have, some really newfound respect for the both of you, and this has been, a real honor for me to sit up here with you guys tonight, and so I thank both of you for that opportunity. But to get on with why I think I will be the one to beat him is that, we have had times in the past where we have a crystal moment in time in our nation's history to be able to advance our society to the next level. And I think we have a very transformational president in President Obama. I'm very proud of him. I was very proud to work on his campaign and do what we could as a family. My whole family got out to door knock for him and do what we could. I think this is one of those transformational times. I think it kind of troubles me that he's kind of, that we've kind of stalled the agenda there in D.C. Some days, my frustration is greater than others, but I agree with Tyler here that there is gridlock, that we have to get out of that. I come from Hill 57. I'm a scrapper. I'm the sixth youngest of 7 children, and my station in life just predicated everything about me that I had to scrap for everything. So I am ready to go over there, and I am ready to do the people's business, the people of this great state. I'm very proud of Montana. My family keeps an old flag that was in our family from the revolution, and I was doing my history today, reading up on, I read history books in my spare time, and I was reading back because this is an era that I love, and I love that old flag. It's over 200 years old, but I'm in awe of it every time my family takes it out, and we will, at some point in this campaign, because it was around when Alexander Hamilton was around, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and we have a long history with this country and building it, and our blood, sweat, tears, suffering, and heartache is in this country, and this is time. It's time to have a Native American woman in Congress. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to beat Denny Rehberg because the people of Montana are recognizing that we need a congressman that makes better decisions. We've had a series of bad decisions that's proved embarrassing to all of us, and certainly to the state. Secondly, I'm going to bring a lifetime of commitment, of hard work, and working hard for values, whether it was walking from Montgomery across the Potomac to Resurrection City with Reverend Abernathy, or registering voters, working for Robert Kennedy in districts where less than 20% of eligible voters were registered, whether it was serving as chair of the Montana State Democratic Party, where we won every single statewide race with the exception of this congressional race, where we elected a great senator in John Tester and re-elected Brian Schweitzer. I know how to win. I know what it takes to get the jobs done, and I bring the work ethic that I've demonstrated. Again, I've been to all 56 counties. I started a year ago. I went to 19 county fairs across the state. I'll be there again this summer, I believe, Melinda. And so that work ethic, that commitment, that understanding of the values that we all share is what, at the end of the day, will allow me to prevail in this race. Finally, when I get there, I'll bring a lifetime of working with Republicans and folks of different political persuasions. I served as president of the Montana Cattlemen's Association, an organization that's pretty evenly split between Republicans and Democrats. I was a founder of the national organization RCAF, again, an organization that's pretty evenly split between Republicans and Democrats. Serving on the International Trade Advisory Committee, particularly in the Bush administration. I sat there with 14 other, there was 15 members on that committee, 14 representing big industry, Cargill, Swift, all the big international organizations, and I found a way to reach across, to socialize, to go to lunch, to have real conversations with real people, and that's what it takes to reach a consensus and a resolution of some of the problems we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Gernant, I'll give you each a minute on this follow-up question. Since Billings is key for Democrats to win statewide, what is your strategy to win in Billings?
Quite frankly, my strategy in Billings is the same everywhere. You work hard. That's how you win. A little bit of luck is always nice, but for the most part, I think the harder you work, the luckier you get. And the more you go out and you pound the pavement, the more likely you are to win. That's what I've been doing throughout this campaign. We've been working more than 12-hour days since back in June, and until you know, the cycle starts picking up here, we're going to continue doing that. It's just something that you have to do in order to be successful. So Billings is there's no mystery to it. You go out and you talk to people the same as you do here, and you tell them the honest truth, and quite frankly, people respect that. Whether they like it or not, whether they agree with you, will not always happen, but they respect the fact that you go there and you tell them the same thing that you tell the people here in Missoula. And so that's what I've been doing across the state. It's what I'll continue doing.
Thank you. Ms. Gopher?
I agree with Tyler that the Billings is you know, it is a tough nut there, but you know, it's the strategy needs to be the same there as anywhere else. But I think one of the strengths that I have is I have a strong appeal to independents. Independent voters, I think, are you know, have just as much weight and pull as any other group out there. I have a strong appeal with strong linkages with the Hispanic community there. I have some family members that come out of the Hispanic community there in Billings. I've got strong linkages with the tribes and the native vote there. And so I think it's those types of things that help. I think every vote counts. And once again, you know, I think more than anybody in this race, I think I am the one that appeals to independent voters, and those are the ones that you got to win over.
Thank you.
I've started in Billings as of last March. I've spent 1 or 2 days a week in Billings over the last several months. That will include this week, as tomorrow I head to Helena and then to Billings before the Mansfield-Metcalf dinner in Helena. But Billings is no different than communities all across Montana. I still believe, at the end of the day, it's the candidate that shakes the most hands, that looks Montanans in the eye and shares their values and their ideas and their concept for moving the state and the nation forward. It works in Billings, it works in Missoula, it works in Lewistown, might even work in Melville. Secondly, at the end of the day, I believe I'll have the endorsement of every single organized labor group across the state. I have an office that we opened in Billings a couple of months ago at the Central Labor Council. I've been endorsed by the UFW already. I hope to gain the endorsement of the AFL-CIO tomorrow, and I think soon thereafter I'll have the endorsement of the laborers. I'm an old Teamster. I understand organized labor. I can count votes. Organized labor in Montana represents almost 110,000 votes, directly or indirectly. And I think, again, at the end of the day, I'll have that support. That's key to winning in Billings. Thank you.
Thank you. This question is directed to Ms. Gopher. Many people are concerned with breaking the grip of Wall Street on our economy and the Supreme Court. When you take your seat in the House of Representatives, how will you work to repair the damage done to our democracy by the Supreme Court in its ruling Citizens United, and support the effort to preserve the rights of personhood for actual human beings and eliminate corporate personhood?
Since this ruling came out, it's been the hot button topic. And, you know, I would have to say that my response to that is to enact legislation that very concisely, we have to convert to some system of public financing of campaigns. First of all, I'm a strong advocate of that, and narrowly defining, if a corporation wants to be a person, then we ought to limit their campaign contributions like every other person. And that is the way around all of the, you know, the rhetoric, the legalese. I believe that we need public campaign financing for the reason that we need real people in charge of our government again, not corporations or empty suits. We need real people there in the halls of Washington, and we need people, we need to keep our democracy vibrant by having real people in there. And I have to say that the campaign system is sickening to watch. I almost feel that you feel your own sense of personal integrity kind of just floating out the door there, and it isn't anything like what you wanted to set out and do. And for me, in my personal experience in life, I would rather, you know, I want to make good laws. I want to see laws that help people, not corporations. And so I think that as long as Wall Street owns our politicians and they dictate who gets elected, our true democracy is out of our hands, and we need to figure out how to get that back. And that is through campaign finance reform. That's through public financing.
Mr. Gernant?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, first of all, the only way we're really, unfortunately, truly going to be able to solve this is by amending the Constitution, because that's what the Supreme Court did to us. They said that fundamentally, constitutionally, a corporation is a person, and that's a problem. But there are things that we can do short of that, although perhaps that's the step along the way. One, I think we need to ensure that any corporation that receives any kind of federal dollars, whether it's through subsidies, through grants, any kind of federal money, should not be allowed to then campaign on behalf of candidates who will turn around and give them federal tax dollar money. We have to implement that system. We also have to make sure that corporations with foreign shareholders are not allowed the same rights, because we don't allow foreign citizens right now to influence elections, and we shouldn't be allowing corporations to bypass that law simply because of the fact that they're corporations. And finally, I would say I agree with Melinda. I think we do fundamentally need campaign finance reform, and that's why I've been a strong proponent of the Fair Elections Now Act, which would provide for public financing for those candidates who get 1,500 donors and make $50,000, both of those hurdles.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald?
Thank you. If I may, Tyler, I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think amending the Constitution is either necessary or a viable solution. But I do have some ideas, and in fact, I met with a group of people last week to address this very issue. I think we can require corporations, before they take a position in favor of a candidate or an issue, require that corporation to have approval of the majority of their shareholders, to make that announcement public, to certify that shareholder election, and finally, on any announcement, there should be a disclaimer by the corporate CEO that he's done that, he has shareholder approval, and he names the corporations directly or indirectly involved in financing whatever speech we're concerned with.
Thank you. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions, and we're going to go ahead and give each candidate 3 minutes for their closing statements, and we'll begin with Mr. McDonald.
Well, first, I want to say thank you. It's always nice to be here in the Garden City, as despite some of the very difficult times we're facing all over western Montana. By the way, I'm headed to the Flathead in the next few days. The unemployment rate there is above 11%. It's suggested that here in Missoula, it's only 6.5%. You know, that number's nonsense. That's only the number that have applied or receiving unemployment benefits. We've got so many people whose benefits have expired, they've given up, and all the other stories that we all know all too well. So what do? You know, I've said it several times here tonight. We need a fundamental change in our economic philosophy. We need to get back to what we know works. We need some Keynesian economists surrounding our president. I worked very hard for President Obama. I traveled with him. He's a wonderful person, and I don't believe the people he selected for his economic team off Wall Street have served either him or the people of this country well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gopher?
I'm just going to share a very, very quick story. November 3rd, 1998 was the day that I buried my father, Robert Gopher. My family, we put him to rest. It was also the day that the Montanans passed the ban on cyanide heap leach gold mining. That was a 8-year effort on my father's part to fight corporations and to fight for clean drinking water in the state and to fight for communities of color for environmental justice. And I've seen Montana really transform itself in that short amount of time, and when I look back, it's already 19 years have gone by. I had the privilege of learning from my father, who was a lifelong grassroots activist. He knew the people. My family has been 30 years on the powwow trail. We know how to get the votes out. I have my brothers working on that. But the thing that I want you guys to take away that my father set the stage for, and this is a whole environmental movement, a new awareness kind of took root in that original fight on the Zortman-Landusky mine out there on the borders of the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation. And many of you may remember this. We brought some of the information here into Missoula. He did a screening of the video that he made on that. And one of the things that has withstood the test of time is that ban. It withstood, I think, a repeal attempt. It withstood a court challenge. It's still the law in our state. My father taught me an important lesson that I think he's instilled it in me, and I carry it with me, is that we Native people at that time, we were capable of creating strong partnerships, cross-issue organizing. This is the tactic that we use to try to bring stronger environmental protection to the state of Montana. We made it to chase the corporations out of the state capitol. They owned our government, and I could do it for you in DC. Thank you.
Well, I want to first of all thank the Missoula County Democrats for putting this on and for the chance for all of us to speak with you today. But most importantly, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out here today and giving yourselves the tools to make an informed decision. And most importantly, becoming engaged in this process. Really, this campaign has no chance if you guys aren't engaged in this process and actively engaging others in this process. And it goes back to what I said at the very beginning of this forum. We have a chance to finally move away from the divisive politics that have really plagued Washington for the last years that I can remember. We have serious issues that we've got to tackle, but we're never going to be able to solve those problems with this constant partisan bickering that's going on right now in D.C. And the truth is, if you send me to D.C., if you send me to Washington, I alone am not going to make that change. If you throw me into that cesspool by myself, I will not be able to make that change. We need each and every one of you to be actively engaged in this process to make that change. And it's like that old story, you know, when you throw a pebble into a pond, it emanates ripples from that pebble, from that splash. Those ripples alone mean very little. But when those ripples clash with other ripples, they create a wave. When all of us are putting those ripples together, they create a wave, and it's those waves that change the system. But we can't create those waves without you being actively involved in this process. And so I would very strongly encourage you, ask you, beg you, to sign up to help on this campaign, to knock doors, to make phone calls, to put up signs, to put on a bumper sticker on your car. It can be that simple. But most importantly, to engage others in this process, because we can't do this alone. So if you haven't already, I hope you'll sign up on our sign-up sheet, because if I don't get a lot of people out of this, Starla's going to be really mad out of me. So
Thank you. Thank you for the candidates for coming here and
thank you all for being here. We have two items. Of course, we're focused on the congressional race tonight, but on March 28th, the Missoula legislative delegation is hosting a fundraiser for a Democratic majority in the 2011 state legislature. It's celebrating the legacy of Ted Kennedy and his brothers and his family. So that's March 28th. It's going to be at 4:30 p.m. at St. Anthony Parish. Please come. Dinner at 5:30, social hour at 4:30. $25 suggested donation. We need to make change in Helena in the way the legislature behaves as well. And finally, what you've all been waiting for, the 50-50.
Winner will receive $46. Good work, everyone. And if you want to, Vice Chair will pick it out, and I'll put it in my wonderful hat.
I didn't buy any tickets. Okay, the winning number is 285103.
Thanks again, everyone.